Ah, time travel. A staple of science fiction with a lot more implications than we often think. How I shall enjoy talking about each timeline and its...
Billy!
Okay, what?
I've come to warn you. Don't go down that road. Don't spend time on plot lines that stop existing. Don't waste time on cutaway gags that are only good for a single review.
You wait until you're well past your prime to tell me this?
I'm still working on the dang graphics for the review I originally scripted. Turns out it was faster to invent time travel and go back and stop myself.
Okay, so should I change up my style?
If you don't want to spend years of your life putting together a pointless Flash Sentry joke.
Aw, I was looking forward to that.
Don't sass back to me!
Okay. I'll do something different. Sheesh. So, are you gonna go back to your own timeline, or fade from existence, or...?
No, Billy. Turns out that altering the timeline results in spontaneous combustion. Kinda obvious in hindsight, but ain't that always the way?
That's exactly how I wanted to go out! At long last, I face the finale to Season 5. And what a doozy it is as both a standalone story and also a linchpin. Late as I am to this review, it's given me some time to consider the episode's placement within the series and how it introduced Starlight Glimmer as a reformed character. But as I've recently been informed, my usual style might not be the best approach. Instead, I'm going to talk about this two-parter under 3 subjects: entertainment, utility, and message. The entertainment side is probably the easiest. As Twilight is giving a presentation on friendship and cutie marks at the School for Gifted Unicorns, we get to see Moondancer again. That goth pony from Rarity's boutique. Nice to see that Rare Find was okay after Tirek drained his magic. Minuet is probably bragging about how she knows Twilight. And then there's Starlight Glimmer, moving on before, oh howdy! Yes, we finally transitioned from Where's Starlight to having her as a full-on threat. Only took her an entire season. All this time spent observing Twilight and friends, but the most important information is gift-wrapped by Twilight.
Without Rainbow Dash's race to defend Fluttershy's honor, this rain boom wouldn't have happened.
Was the name of this presentation How to Defeat Myself and My Friends in 5 Easy Steps? Because I can name them. Step 1. Hide in the bushes and spy on your rival. Step 2. Overhear a critical bit of info.
Time travel? Absolutely not. Time travel is not something to be messed with.
Step 3. Steal the time travel spell from It's About Time and modify it. Step 4. Await your rival's return. This one's a real patience tester. And Step 5. Bring it all together to change the past. In this case, that means foiling the sonic rain boom in any manner of ways, with outcomes so myriad that it would probably take an hour to talk about them all. Instead, I think it's easier to start a Rainbow Gets Owned counter. Poor Rainbow is something of a sacrifice in all this, followed closely by Twilight and Spike.
You obviously don't mean us falling, because that's becoming pretty routine.
Come on, Twilight, let me have my fun. And then there are the visual cues for each timeline. A steady red tint for a world in which King Sombra sparked a war with Equestria, complete with battle-hardened versions of the main cast and a demonstration of how a pony army fights.
Come on, girls!
A green theme in an Equestria almost completely overtaken by Chrysalis and the Changelings. I find it particularly funny that Chrysalis chose to disguise herself as Honest Applejack. Although this timeline takes on a different kind of meaning now, because I wonder how Thorax might fit into such a world. Now there's a story. Then there's a dark blue motif for a world where Nightmare Moon appears to reign unchallenged. I talked about this one at length in my Two Worlds review, so not gonna go too far here. There is, however, one scene that I think is worth mentioning.
Your kingdom?
Who else?
Celestia, of course.
When I talked about this episode in the context of comparing Celestia versus Nightmare Moon's rule, that look conveyed the idea that the ponies were afraid to even mention Celestia's name within the dictator's presence. However, if you wanted to expand the story of this alternate world, it could take on a different meaning. Perhaps Rainbow and this unnamed stallion are putting up a front and don't want to be outed as conspirators. That's the fun thing about these Elseworlds. They're playgrounds to imagine how characters would react in a different scenario. It's interesting to see how the characters remain themselves in some ways, but also change based on duress. I can't imagine Fluttershy saying this in any other future.
All servants of Queen Chrysalis found in these woods must be destroyed.
However, the entertainment factor can also backfire because each timeline raises different questions. It can be very easy to get so caught up in wondering how we reached a certain point that the unfolding events lose a lot of meaning. How was one villain foiled without Twilight while another one is advancing unchecked? In fact, did those other villains return? In many ways, I view these alternate futures as what-if scenarios, where Twilight and friends failed rather than never banding together. The other alternate futures all possess some kind of color shift, usually sliding towards red, that emphasize the wrongness. Though I have to wonder how the Flim Flam brothers are the penultimate doom for Equestria. Conquerors, destroyers, and the last step before oblivion are a pair of swindlers? I can only imagine what was going through Twilight's head during Friendship University.
They're obviously up to something. It's Flim and Flam!
Well, that certainly wasn't friendly.
Go on, Twilight. Zap 'em. Zap 'em now before they can bring about the apocalypse. Yeah, for the good of Equestria, they must die. Wait a minute. I thought I took care of Twilight's shoulder angel. So did I. You know what this means? She really is a goody two-hooves. Disgusting. I feel unclean. Oh, I don't get it. This is so bad. I just can't even know what to do with today. No, I can't. Just can't.
Even the fights between Twilight and Starlight are a lot of fun. Not on the level of Twilight versus T-Rex due to a lack of impact on the environment, but still a great action sequence. And Starlight is an enjoyable villain. She's this nice blend of comedy and menace, especially while monologuing.
It was a special place, and you and your friends took it away!
Not to mention her sarcasm and delight as she thwarts Twilight again and again. What's less entertaining is how the conflict ends. However, to talk about why this isn't so entertaining, we have to shift gears into utility. I mean utility in the sense that this episode is supposed to further evolve what has come before and set the stage for seasons to follow. In particular, making Starlight Glimmer a very prominent presence. Not what I would call a member of the main cast, but dancing the line between primary and secondary characters. The process by which she's been integrated still causes argument between fans today. Part of this argument stems from the fact that Starlight is so magically powerful.
But it looked like she could fly with just magic.
Not even Twilight could manage that, hence the iconic balloon from the opening, and the reason Hasbro could sell
a My Little Pony balloon toy. Don't pretend you don't want it. You saw it in the show. Go buy it.
Funny note, I don't think Starlight Glimmer has ever ridden in that balloon. Regardless, one of the problems people had with this idea was that a unicorn like Starlight could outclass the element of magic herself. There were hints of this conflict brewing back at Season 5's start. Many felt that Twilight should have had a defense against the Cutie mark removal spell, which again turned out to be Starlight's own power rather than any mystical artifact. I too felt unsure about this, but time and reflection led to a realization. Twilight isn't the element of magic because she has the most raw power, but rather the greatest ability to inspire others and foster that magic. We see that happening as she experiences the alternate timelines.
Come quietly to the dungeons of Canterlot, and I promise to leave the others alone.
Even if there's a chance Chrysalis will honor her word, shouldn't you try?
If you're tempted to bang your head against the wall from that line, I was right there with you. However, it does speak to a virtue that can be both a strength and a hindrance. No matter what the timeline, Twilight doesn't treat the ponies as mockeries of her friends or replaceable versions. They are very real and very much alive, and she treats them as such. I'm not a fan of Twilight encouraging Sakura to make the sacrifice, as that's not terribly noble, but I do think that Twilight would make that same sacrifice if put in a similar situation. Fortunately, Sakura has a better idea.
Race to the map while we hold off their attack. Stop Starlight and put the whole world back on track.
And Twilight turns that into a driving action. Again and again, she fights with Starlight to keep time on track. Again and again, she fails, especially at trash talking.
But it's gonna take a lot more than that.
Lucky for you, there's more where that came from.
The thing is that even while driven to win, Twilight doesn't have Starlight's level of aggression. Worse still, she and Spike are the only ones who keep getting dragged into the alternate timelines and experiencing what are some pretty awful images. Friends bereft of spirit, life, freedom, or hope. You can hear the fatigue in Twilight's voice.
I wish I could say I was surprised. but you can't stop me from trying.
I guess that's the episode's utility in celebrating Twilight. Even if she can't match Starlight's raw power, she doesn't stop. Instead, she tries to create a connection. Which begs the question, where is Starlight during all of these alternate timelines? Is she still camping out in the past, never witnessing the results of her actions? I find this kind of funny because a common complaint is that whenever Starlight is featured in an episode, most of the main cast takes a back seat. Yet in this pivotal episode that's supposed to make her part of the crew, there isn't enough Starlight to help us understand. Instead, a single event is meant to sum up her entire worldview.
His family recognized his magical talent and sent him off to Canterlot. I never saw him again.
This is a trope known as the Freudian excuse, a singular event meant to explain a character's motives.
Because when I was a little kid, my mother wouldn't get me a sled. Why wouldn't she get me a sledge, Mart? Why?
I don't know, Siegfried.
You think maybe it was because we lived in Florida?
Unfortunately, this trope can easily backfire. Sometimes because the character's actions are disproportionate to the original wrong. She lost one friend to a cutie mark, and so...
all cutie marks must pay.
There's also the problem that a singular event isn't enough to define a character. That's not to say that there aren't hints or that we wouldn't learn more about her in later seasons. Yet when this episode first aired, there was a very prominent lack of info. It's harder to empathize with her if we don't understand the kind of pony she was beyond this moment.
He moved on, and I didn't! I stayed here and never made another friend because I was too afraid another cutie mark would take them away too!
He moved on, and I didn't. I think that's far more telling about her character than this very shoddy philosophy on cutie marks. Yet with this in mind, I have to ask why she was so hell-bent on revenge against Twilight when the means to fixing everything were already at her disposal. I can accept that her grudge against Twilight made Starlight short-sighted, but now that the moment is before her, why doesn't she try to stop it? What's more, her philosophy is never directly challenged. There is a moment where one could think that her no cutie marks policy actually makes sense.
Oh, isn't it a shame we don't live in a world where every pony is equal? No one would ever tease anyone there.
Problem with that philosophy is that you can't guarantee complete equalization unless you force it. And since you can't, say, force ponies like Fluttershy to fly faster, you instead have to force ponies like Rainbow Dash to slow down. You have to control every aspect of life, often by suppressing others rather than raising them. Plus, such a system would, by its nature, require that at least one individual maintain greater power to enforce the norm. It's a shame that Starlight didn't witness these timelines, because Twilight could have used that as examples of how Starlight's own philosophy won't work, much like Nightmare Moon's view.
No pony in my kingdom but me should possess a magic powerful enough to change time.
Starlight would deny it, of course, but Twilight could point out that she's trying to decide everything for Equestria by herself, or that her plan relies on her being the center of power. Season 5 featured several antagonists reform, and in my eyes, 2 of them were the most believable shifts in the series. Gilda and Diamond Tiara opened themselves to change because they looked at where they were and decided that they weren't happy, that they'd lost something important or were missing an element they couldn't claim. That seems far more relatable than being zapped good, or very sudden shifts that hinge on simply being offered friendship. Yet while their reformation moments were rushed or hard to accept, I do think that Starlight, Discord, and even Princess Luna have become more enjoyable because the show followed up on their stories and presented further info. Not so for Gilda and Diamond Tiara, who have only made brief cameos. But for this moment, it's asking for a very sharp change in a character without giving the audience a lot to understand. Just as it's trying for a very hasty reconciliation by having Starlight apologize to the main 6 and her former town members. I'm afraid that montages have become Starlight's main avenue for interacting with most of the main cast. Yet it's the final song that brings us from utility to message. What has this episode been trying to convey? Well, Twilight has one take.
And it's not just my friendships that are important to Equestria. Every pony's are. When yours ended, it led us here. Friendship connects all of Equestria, and undoing one group of friends made its magic less powerful.
This can work when one considers that broken friendships like the Pillars in Stygian, Celestia and Luna, and even Tempest Shadow's broken friendships have all eventually come back to endanger Equestria. Yet this clashes with the entertainment aspect. Those lost relationships weakened Equestria, but losing Twilight's group of friends broke it. Are they the last line of defense? If so, that does make their friendship more special than any other, which Rainbow Dash and Pinkie echo.
I mean, I knew my Rainboom was awesome, but I never thought all of Equestria depended on it. Or on us.
Here's the thing. There are many stories in our culture where time travel helps someone realize the true importance of their lives, even if they don't seem all that special if judged by modern standards. The most famous example is, of course, It's a Wonderful Life. Twilight and her friends have never questioned the importance of their friendship. Having saved Equestria several times over, I'd argue that the message of the rainbow's importance is redundant. So in many ways, it justifies Starlight's reaction.
Spare me your overblown ego!
Many of my favorite time travel stories feature a lesson that's easily overlooked. Often it's the main character trying to correct a mistake in their past, only to realize that mistake helped them become the person they are. To remove that is to remove their entire sense of self, and that even bad memories can lead to positive outcomes. Or the characters are confronted with a difficult realization. In order to safeguard the future, they have to allow an event to unfold, even with full awareness of the pain it brings. Neither of these ideas are expressed in this story, to its loss. Suppose for a moment that Twilight interrupts Starlight mid-spell, and they go through time together. Each time they land in just the wrong place to foil an important event. Each time the two ponies get pulled back to experience one of the alternate futures, with Starlight trying to escape back into time and Twilight following. The truth doesn't come to light until they finally arrive at the moment Sunburst is supposed to receive his Cutie mark. Starlight had been following his influence throughout time to reach this moment, but didn't understand why it always connected to Twilight's friends. It isn't until Twilight recognizes Sunburst that she understands. While at the school for gifted unicorns, Sunburst had offered a brief but important moment of support to Twilight, which helped her reach her current status. Twilight implores Starlight that for the future of Equestria, to avoid all the horrible things they've witnessed, Sunburst has to get his Cutie mark. This would also likely unleash a shipping war not seen since the Digimon fandom, but some guys just want to watch the world burn. Then it all comes down to a moment of choice. Starlight can stop that book stack from falling and deny Sunburst the chance to catch it, or she can choose to let things happen. Choosing the latter, she admits that she's seen herself in the villains they faced and doesn't know what to do next. That's when Twilight can stress that while the past can't be revised, the future is still Starlight's to shape and offers her the chance to learn. We then enjoy a quick montage of the two working together to safeguard each of those critical moments and mending the future. Despite the proposed changes, there's one element that I hope would carry through. It's something I couldn't realize until witnessing several other finales. Consider what happens in following seasons: a rescue by reformed villains, aligning with historical champions, relying on students to save Equestria. This two-parter was, in many ways, a celebration of Twilight and Friends' accomplishments. A victory lap before allowing the finales to involve more characters and letting go of the theme that Twilight and her friends are the only saving force. An idea which I'm happy to put to rest. I still wish that Celestia, Luna, and Cadence could stand alongside Twilight against a crisis, but allowing others to step up was a welcome change. As for this two-parter, I do find it highly entertaining, with a lot of great visuals and surprisingly dark scenarios. In terms of utility, I don't think it connects the audience with Starlight enough to integrate her with the rest of the cast. Though I eventually enjoyed her presence, I think this awkward transition still hangs over many folks and their tolerance for her role. And in terms of message, I think you can interpret some very positive and encouraging themes from Fluttershy and the Bullies, but some of the other messages need refinement. And now, at long last, I can say I've reviewed Season 5, which means my future self won't have to waste time on boatloads of graphics. Which means he'll never come back in time to warn me. Which means that I won't know to choose a different approach. Which means... I'm sorry I keep breaking your stuff.